Welcome back to the Fantasy Football School. Today's class, we're going to talk about 2024 draft sleepers on offense. I got 5 to talk about. Some of you probably never heard of because they're pretty much, most of them are like deep sleepers past the 5th round, but class is in session. Alright, to start off the session, we are going to look at my first sleeper of the draft. One of my favorite sleepers of this draft, only because his stock has fallen so hard that he's considered a sleeper now because the consensus essentially has a 3rd round grade on him. I personally still have a late second round grade on him because of the ability he's shown on tape and his testing at the combine. He's tested pretty well, honestly. If you actually ignore that Senior Bowl week, which he was so bad, I think he dropped like 80-90% of the passes during the game and during practice, that the only way to save his Senior Bowl week was to play at the game and look amazing, but he followed that up with more drops, which is very unfortunate. But I mean, if you look at his body of work outside of that, he's definitely like a late first, early second type of prospect. But like I said, if you do add that bad week at the Senior Bowl, it's pretty fair that he's a 3rd round prospect at this point. But out of all the 3rd round or late second, mid second round prospect, I think he has the best ability to be that alpha wide receiver 1 prospect because of the build, the speed, and the route running. Or like at least he can play all 3 levels of the game or of the receiving field. He's shown that at UNC, although he excelled more like being a boundary receiver, doing a jump ball and like outmaneuvering players. Fortunately, that didn't show at the Senior Bowl because he made a lot of drops. But if I'm a Jaguars fan, and if he was available with our 2nd round pick, I would run to the podium. Assuming you don't draft a receiver in the 1st round, but he would be a steal because the traits he has. Yeah, I get it. You had a bad Senior Bowl, but hey, everybody has bad days. I think he's getting a little too much flack on it, but I understand if you're gonna deduct him for that. So, anyways, let's move on to my next sleeper here. Definitely a deep one here. We got Tyron Tracy Jr. from Purdue, redshirt senior. He's a running back only because he switched to running back on his last year at Purdue. He initially played wide receiver and a return specialist. Although he wasn't, like a game-changing receiver, he did have some moments as a returner. But he looked so much more comfortable playing running back this past season compared to, receiver. Although he's still learning, he still has a lot to learn as a running back. But he did have like almost like a full workload this upcoming season. And he kind of reminds me of Duke Johnson Jr., in which he's shown more as a runner between the tackles than Duke has, whereas Duke is more like a nuanced wide receiver, if you get me. But they have the same kind of skill set where they're all around players that can line out on the slot, return kicks, especially run between the tackles. If you need a late round flyer on a versatile player on offense, Tyron Tracy would definitely be a good fit. He's a pretty good returner. He plays a pretty good special teams player in college, so I would welcome him to my Jaguars, especially because you need more of the explosiveness in the return game and like that ability to be versatile on offense. And next is a tight end, one of my favorite prospects in this class, Tip Raymond from Illinois. He's one of the better blockers in this class, especially at his size, like senior, 22 years old, 6'5", 271. I think he ran like a 4.7. I can't remember the top of my head right now, but man, this dude is super athletic for his size. 6'5", 271. I think he had like a 9.7 RAS grade. And like I said, he's one of the better blockers in this class. And he's also not a terrible receiver because although they didn't use him as much at Illinois, he did manage to get 20 catches the last 2 seasons, which shows that he can be a threat at receiver. But he's gonna earn his money blocking and eventually, improve his receiving game. So I wouldn't be surprised if initially first, he's not a good receiving threat, but he's pretty young, he's pretty athletic. He has the build to, he has the pedigree to be a more of a receiving threat in the league. But right now I have a 5th round grade and my comp is Cade Otton. Otton was a more like, what's it called? He was a much better receiving threat coming into the league. Whereas Raymond is a much better blocker than Otton. But pretty much they're like kinda in the same build and that they're a much better blocker than receiver coming into the league. So if you need a blocking tight end that you can develop, tip Raymond at the 5th round. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the 4th round because of how athletic he was, and he's fairly young, especially with his size. And next, I got another sleeper at wide receiver, Jamari Thrash from Louisville, senior, 23 years old, 6 foot, 188. Currently have a 5th round grade on him. He is an all-around receiver in which he's a pretty smooth route runner. Although he wasn't, very productive in college, only because, it's Louisville. I think who was their quarterback? It was like 5th year senior, like Jake Plum or something Plummer, I think. Anyways, he's shown a lot on tape that can translate into the NFL. He reminds me of the Dontavion Wicks from the Packers, in which he just knew how to get open. He's just smooth. He's a pretty good route runner. Although Thrash still has a lot to improve as a route runner, you can see the smoothness in his movement that it should translate and be able to, use that to improve his other areas of improvement. But anyways, Jamari Thrash, number 4. And finally, my last one in this list. Can't have a sleeper without a sleeper quarterback, right? Especially in the year or in the era of Brock Purdy. So he is my Brock Purdy in this draft. He's pretty athletic for his size. He's shown enough ability in college that should be able to translate in the NFL. He's a good intermediate passer, decent arm, probably on the range of Brock Purdy arm. I think it's a little bit better than Brock Purdy. So he's basically a little more athletic Brock Purdy, but I think Brock Purdy had a more successful college career. Whereas Kedon Slovis was more, after that amazing freshman year at USC, he pretty much got worse and worse when he went to Pitt, and then he went to BYU last year. But I think that has more to do with, like the talents around him, because there's instances in BYU and Pitt where like, oh yeah, that's the guy we saw at USC during his freshman year. But anyways, I think he's gonna be like a late day 3 pick, 6th, 7th round pick because of that potential he's shown freshman year and his athletic ability. He reminds me of Jimmy G from the Raiders, just that game manager type that can help you get a win. He's not a liability. He has those moments that he can elevate a player within a game, but he hasn't done that consistently since freshman year. So pretty much my Brock Purdy of this draft. So those are my top 5 offensive sleepers for this 2024 NFL draft. So anyways, that's it for today's class. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.